Carla, I put up the deck, but thank you everyone for coming, and we're really excited to talk to you about UPRC. With that, I think Carla is going to talk a little bit about the presentation we've put together and that Carla's been instrumental with, and the rest of the team. So I will now hand it to Carla.
Sounds like we're all trying to hand it off. I thought we were starting with Kris, so.
Oh.
So we keep on passing the buck. Kris, did you want to give us some context, because there was so much work to get to the exciting release on Friday?
Yeah, happy to just start with some history, and Josh, thanks again for coordinating this. But yeah, just to give some context, this really came from a lot of work within the United Church of Canada. I think what really identified the need and the ability to work in this situation was kind of like the confluence of a few different components. I think in 2014, the comprehensive review task group surveyed about 600 plus congregations within the United Church of Canada. And without even asking property related questions, about a third of those congregations identified a need to make an urgent real estate decision in the short term. So at that time, I think that was estimated to be between kind of a 5 to 10 year period. So as you can see, we're already fastly approaching that. And then I think the other component too was with the creation of EDGEy network is really starting to see an overwhelming need for property support, which is where I helped work on that. And I think it was interesting, even Rob and I, when he first started that work, really didn't really see himself as being able, as we were looking at kind of new forms of ministry, looking at being involved in property, but just recognized as you started to have those conversations, it was really a massive need. And the ability to look at it, I think, more from a holistic approach rather than on a site-by-site basis, with just based on kind of the nature and decision-making of the United Church, obviously a very grassroots organization. But I think one of the key messages that we really began to hear was that it would be great to have some larger support for some of this work. And that's what really kind of started the conversation, started the allocation of resources to be able to kind of look into this more clearly. And as we began to do that work, we really identified, I think, 3 key tasks that we needed to go forward to be able to do that work properly. The first component of that was taking a look at the portfolio. So Carla will touch on that, but it was really looking at all of the assets across the United Church and just kind of being able to understand before we go forward and recommend one particular resource and alternatives to kind of help address the solution, understanding what we have and understanding how that works. So the second component of that was just really looking at the current approach to real estate decision making in itself. So learning and working with congregations that did property projects well, and what were some of the common denominators there for success. And secondly, on the projects that didn't go so well, what were some of the key learnings that we were able to gather from those, and how could we ensure that that doesn't happen again, and really be kind of a collective resource that not only captures those learnings, but is able to kind of address solutions to help kind of prevent those and support each other going forward. And that really kind of led into the third recommendation was, what is that resource solution look like? And how do those components function, recognizing the different layers within the United Church, the different need for decision making, and ultimately making sure that this helps not only address some of the complex real estate decisions, but really ties back to the ministry of the church, and make sure that we're helping to kind of look at it from a holistic approach. So I'll stop there and let Carla kind of just jump in to some of the deck that we have here that will touch on some of that, a lot of that in a bit more detail.
So you can tell it was a long journey, but such an important journey to get to where we are today. And what we're showing is actually what we would talk to a community of faith as they're investigating their property, and it's part of the decision-making process, and just seeing why this is so important. So really going to our next slide is that we have recognized that once we lose these assets in community, and they are community assets, they're properties that we're never going to have access to again as society. And so when we're looking at this opportunity, it's huge. It's actually the ability to make the country, the world that we want to live in. This is a huge opportunity for that. And the challenge is that many of these churches, I mean, all denominations, we've heard the quote before, where 9,000 communities of faith across all denominations are expected to close within the next decade. And that's something that with regeneration works, they've been talking about that, and with National Trust. And here we're just seeing for the United Church of Canada, this is the same type of trend that we're seeing. So what does that look like? Well, if this is the existing inventory that what Kris was talking about, we looked at all the various sites, about 3,000. Well, in 10 years, it would look something like this. So the next slide. And yet, when we look at real estate, I think mostly if it was a portfolio or if we're doing investments, it would go on a general upward trend. The challenge is that communities of faith, we often look at it as a liability, not an asset. And of course we do, because all of the asset is really tied up in the buildings, and we think about maintenance, and it's a cost every year, and that's how we're doing our budgets on this. And yet the rest of the world is really looking at real estate as an asset. So how can we unleash that asset to create that social impact that we want to see in our neighborhoods? So there's 3 very distinct examples of what we've been seeing. And I love when Tim talks about real estate 1.0 to 2.0 and 3.0. So if you want to kind of dig into that, I'd love to hear you go, Tim. It's so interesting to me. The first case study here is a case study where a church looked at it as a liability. They ended up selling the property to a developer, and within 1 year, the developer actually did some rezoning, had some experience when it came to the real estate industry, and was able to get a 5 times multiple on what this was actually worth in 1 year. And so instead of that legacy and all of that social benefit being reinvested back in the neighborhood or thinking about community first, it went into an individual's hands. Where we contrast that to these other 2 different projects that are happening right now. Bloor Street United Church is offering a different story, and so many of you have probably heard about this, and this is something that UPRC is now leaning into to support this as a project. But it's looking at where they are, the fact that there's density right off Bloor Street, and what else is possible here despite having heritage. And so how high can we go? What does it look like in terms of preservation? And at this point, it's looking that there's going to be residential there, as well as office space, as well as community space, all in the same place. St. Giles is in Hamilton, and so it was actually 2 churches that decided to become a new ministry, so they both closed and became a new ministry together. The St. Giles location was identified to be a great location for housing, whereas the other is right downtown Hamilton and a great location for community space. And so these 2 church buildings or spaces are being reimagined together as a total holistic project. So I don't know, Tim, if you wanted to add anything into that one, or we'll keep on going.
No, I think you covered it. We can see.
Yeah. So I love those because they feel so hopeful. And so we ask the question then, why are more communities of faith not feeling the opportunity or the expertise to do that? And really, we've identified many barriers that are holding us back as a denomination, as individual communities of faith. And it's not just United Churches, it is going to be all denominations that are being faced with this. And so what's holding them back? It really is looking at our real estate as a liability. It's primarily being reactive when it comes to real estate decisions. And then basically 3 to 7 is just a lack of expertise. And so typically when we're looking at commercial or residential and these large developments, it takes a lot more expertise than we typically are going to have in our volunteer base. So UPRC is a visionary new way of approaching real estate when it comes to communities of faith and nonprofit. And that's not me saying that. That was the deputy mayor of Toronto saying that on Friday during our media release of this. And when I approached her afterwards, I thanked her for her words and said, thank you for saying that this is visionary. And she looked at me like I had, like, I don't know, 5 eyes. And she's like, well, it is. And so what is the UPRC difference here? UPRC is not about the profits retained by an individual or by a for-profit corporation. It's about these profits are able to be reinvested or invested in affordable housing, community space, the sustainability, and the mission that's been discerned in partnership with the community of faith that's its partner. In terms of the construction costs, again, it's not going to be just like highest profits and focus on that. It is about sustainability, durability, reduced operating costs. This is a long-term plan in terms of the overall structure of UPRC. It's not just getting these off the ground and selling just ownership. There's also an entire rental portfolio here approach, which means that UPRC does care about the long-term stabilization of these buildings. And then land value. Well, traditionally, developers have often approached churches who, because they don't have the information or because they're feeling a sense of urgency. Whereas with UPRC, a community of faith is working in partnership. And so that does ensure the fair market value and that we're actually on the same side. We are partners in any of these developments. So really, it's taking all those barriers that we saw before and flipping it on its head. So it's making real estate an asset, it's bringing the expertise to bear, and it's allowing us to be proactive because of that inventory that Kris talked about. And as we're just gonna move forward on a couple of these slides. On the being proactive, it allows us to be thinking more about our mission, about financial sustainability, long-term planning, because we're not waiting until it's too late to do this. And it's allowing us to really focus on the mission and really seeing that our property can be mission or feed into the mission and that they aren't separate decisions, that they can actually be a holistic approach and that our property is our abundance. So it's really understanding how our missional goals and our property goals can actually work together. And so in the next slide here, it's really that property can fuel mission. So it's when we do these developments and we have a revenue stream from this, what can it fund? Or property can be the mission itself in the housing component or the community first and community space approach. So UPRC was just launched last October. I know that Tim, our CEO, who's with us today, just started in May. And our media release with our partnership with CMHC and the federal government was released on Friday. So this is all very fresh information. Our vision, which was really co-created, lots of conversations, is to work together to build open, resilient communities that honor the land and create a legacy for future generations. And our mission is to be a trusted partner and leader. And I've used the word partner a lot already, working collaboratively to build diverse, affordable, sustainable communities where all can live, gather, and thrive. And an important part of this is each project is financially sustainable. They are sustainable by themselves. They do consider community and understanding that housing alone is not a neighborhood. Core principles, the affordable housing for all Canadians, maximizing social impact, being innovative, looking at things like passive house and mass timber, and continuing to look internationally at ways that we can do things differently. Collaboration with both public and private partners, and then recognize the diversity of our communities. So these are really the guiding principles and vision and mission that's leading us forward. And the 3 key pieces that UPRC brings, or I guess the resources specifically, is the expertise and the financial resources. The key pieces that we do is really the feasibility and the planning at the very beginning. I'm on slide 21, I think the next one, perfect. So all the planning at the beginning, the project development pieces as we actually do the pre-development and get a project ready, and then actually building, and then the final piece being the long-term stabilization. So those two diagrams at the beginning, I mean, that's a game changer. It's having the expertise that we have and the team. At this point, UPRC is already a staff of 7 with planners and real estate expertise, investment banking background, and experience in assets under management of $3 billion. This is the type of real estate expertise that we've brought to the United Church of Canada and communities of faith and other denominations at this point. And then the financial resources. The media release on Friday was CMHC committing $20 million to UPRC and the United Church of Canada in this brave new move. So this is a game changer.
And Carla, I might add one point here too, and I think it's because we can start thinking of, if you will, the portfolio as a whole and what is possible with the whole really changes the dynamic when you're working with public and sector and private sector partners. The CMHC partnership is a great example of that. When we work together, we can bring so many more resources to the table, whether that's dollars from CMHC, it's negotiating power with the city, it's bringing in experts, whether it's sort of, I always say we're punching well above our weight in terms of the support that we can bring in, because there is this realm of the larger and what is possible. And that's a huge game changing. You know, normally you would get that, that really wouldn't be available if we were just talking about a single project. And that's becoming more and more evident as we've gone on this journey, that is critical to us moving these projects forward.
Great, thank you. No, it is. So how does it work? And so I think you guys are all probably asking that, and I'm sure there will be more questions about this. But really, here's the project pathway, is that UPRC, when we're approached by a community of faith, if a regional council is asking us about a specific community of faith, or even another denomination is asking about their portfolio of property, we do a preliminary review first. So, like, is something feasible? What's possible there? And really, our intent is, like, we're not wanting to go down the path and waste their time or any energy if it doesn't make sense at this point in time. So we do that preliminary review and give some options up front prior to even signing an MOU. Seeing other organizations, often with the preliminary review, there's already so much information, you would have normally had to pay a couple $1,000s for it. That work is actually done before an MOU is already done. So it gets really exciting and hopeful really early on. Once an MOU going through, then we start actually testing and doing the due diligence around any of the assumptions in the preliminary review. And we also work hand in hand with the community of faith in helping to align their missional decisions with the property decisions. And so we partnered with EDGEy and the missional coaches to support communities of faith through that decision-making process. At which point, as the numbers continue to come aligned and the missional plan is approved by the regions, and in partnership with them, we have the definitive agreement that we're able to then actually move forward with the development. Once that happens, like we said, mostly we would like long-term management, and there will be some affordable home ownership, but the majority would be rentals. So that is the flow of this. I'm probably going to just jump right into the team so that you can see who is with us, because we did talk about expertise. It's the financial and leveraging those assets that Tim already alluded to, but the team is quite strong. Tim has 20 years of real estate experience working at TD and Manulife real estate funds. And we have Min. He actually teaches at Columbia and just a whiz when it comes to the numbers for us and just solid backing. Kris, he's been walking the UPRC from its inception to now and continues to support the overall projects. Carla, she actually had worked on doing the initial inventory for us, and now she actually works with UPRC. Myself, having worked with EDGEy now for, oh my goodness, I think 10 years, and working directly with communities of faith, Ross, and then 2 students actually from University of Waterloo who have just been, well, they put together this deck, so they're quite talented. And lots of other partners, like Tim said, and they've all been so excited about the social impact that we're able to make, and that's opened up new conversations or conversations that might not have ever happened because they're actually our partners as well. So we're very excited about what the future holds, and we're really hopeful to hear some questions from you today, but also excited to see whether or not there's any opportunities based on your community of faith. So thank you. I think we're open for any questions, or Tim.